Okay, in this video, I'm going to be installing the 2phast Tactical Handguard, which I just previously did a review on. I have a 16-inch upper right here, which I've already removed the existing handguard. What I need to do next is I need to remove the muzzle device, the low-profile gas block, the gas tube, and this proprietary barrel nut, which I'm going to do off camera, and we'll be back shortly. On the Radical Firearms low-profile gas block, there's basically just two Allen bolts on the underside that you need to loosen up. It does appear that there was some Loctite on here, but it wasn't difficult to break this free, so it must have been something like a blue Loctite or maybe a rock set. Also on the underside of this Radical Firearms upper, where the gas block is, the rear bolt, where my finger is actually, the barrel is actually dimpled. So Radical Firearms went the extra step to actually dimple the barrel, so when you tighten down the screw actually goes into the dimple. So in the event something were to hit the gas block, it isn't going to move. So good craftsmanship there. You don't see that too often by manufacturers taking that extra time to dimple the barrel. Now this is a proprietary barrel nut, a Radical Firearms proprietary barrel nut that I'm not familiar with. So this will be my first attempt at taking one of these off. This is a standard GI barrel nut wrench, which I'm assuming will work for this. So I'm just trying to... It looks like it lines up, but there might be a specific trick to doing this. It looks like it lines up, but it looks like these notches on here are too large. I'm going to go ahead and experiment with this a little bit off camera so it's not too painful for you to watch, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, this USGI tool fit on this particular barrel nut wrench, or on this barrel nut, and it was on pretty tight. This particular short socket wrench did not give me enough leverage to break this free. I ended up using a breaker bar. Also, this tool fit on here pretty tight, so I had to use a hammer to kind of tap it on there, so it's definitely a very tight fit. I did try the Magpul barrel nut wrench. Not suitable for removing the Radical Firearms proprietary barrel nut. There's just too many tabs here, so it didn't work. And there we go. So that's more or less the removal of the barrel nut. And next I'm going to clean up these threads. It looks like there's some grease on there. I'm going to clean that up and reapply some grease. Now before I get to cleaning up the threads right here, let's go ahead and remove the barrel. Again, we see some CLP or some type of oil on here, which is appropriate for any time a steel item mates with a aluminum piece. So that's good. Going back to what I mentioned about the gas block, you can see that they made one single dimple there, so the bolt from the gas block would sink down into the dimple. Great attention to detail. You don't see a lot of people doing that if they use those types of gas blocks. Some companies that use low-profile gas blocks, they'll actually cross-pin them, so they'll actually have a jig that they put on here, and then they actually drill partially through the barrel. So when they drop the gas block on, they hammer in a single pin, or they'll do a single pin and 2 screws. This one just happens to have the 2 screws. So everything I've seen so far about the build is good with this. Now I'm just going to basically clean this up and remove whatever's on here and put some new grease on. All right, with the threads cleaned up and a new coat of Aeroshell 33 MS. I've got these little containers here that I picked up from Umbrella Corporation. Mil-spec quality grease. If you're mating any type of steel to aluminum or aluminum to steel, you would want to apply some of this type of grease to prevent any type of galling between the surfaces. You can find this grease at Palmetto State Armory, a few other places online, Amazon and eBay. Comes in gigantic tubes. A lot of people will buy the tubes and squirt a little bit in this little container and sell these for $4 or $5. Very well worth investing in. One of these tubes will last you a long time, or one of these little containers will last you a long time. All right, with this ready to go, as you can see, I've got this upper receiver in this vise clamping system. There's actually another piece that slides into the upper receiver first before you clamp it in here. That prevents crushing of the upper receiver. And it also has this gas tube alignment rod right here. Now, if you don't have something like this, you could use a punch or something to keep the barrel nut and the gas tube hole here in the upper receiver aligned. So that's going to be important for the installation of this handguard. The handguard has a 2-piece barrel nut design. The first alignment ring piece is aluminum. The second piece is a steel. Very high quality items from what I can see. I will be putting some grease on this as well, since it's a steel barrel nut and it's going into aluminum, and of course aluminum onto this. Actually, that's aluminum on aluminum, so probably not as important to have the Aeroshell, but doing it anyway. The beveled end of this obviously goes towards the receiver. Now, according to the manufacturer, we would hand tighten this down and then back it off so that it aligns with the gas tube, like so. Now, the manufacturer of this particular barrel nut, like previously mentioned, they make a recommendation to put some blue Loctite on the threads, get this aligned like so, let it dry overnight, and then come back and proceed with the installation. And I'm not going to do that because I'm really not a fan of using Loctite on barrel nuts. There is a time and a place to use Loctite. I don't believe the barrel nut assemblies need Loctite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this rod here to keep this aligned. I'm going to install the barrel and install this nut, and I'm going to tighten it down. So I'm going to put some Aeroshell 33 MS on this, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, my barrel still has a good amount of oil on it, and the inside of the upper receiver is oiled as well. If you were doing a new build and you didn't have any oil already on the barrel, you could use the 33 MS as well. We're going to insert that until it's fully seated. The proprietary barrel nut here, I've got the 33 MS on it. And this USGI barrel nut tool should be compatible with this. I probably should check it before I get too deep. Yeah. This particular tool is not compatible with this barrel nut. Oh, this is interesting. Again, this looks like, to tighten this down, you can use a castle nut wrench. I've got the mag pull right here, and this appears to line up correctly. So, learn something new every day. And I'll have to push that in a smidgen. Now I'm going to leave that there because I'm assuming as I tighten this barrel nut down, this might move. So we're going to definitely want to keep this in place so this doesn't move, because we want to make sure that our gas tube stays aligned correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and there's a little excess of grease right there. I'm going to clean that up, and we'll be back to torque this down. Okay, for torquing down the barrel wrench, there's a pretty broad range of torque settings to do barrel nuts. It's given between 30 and 80 foot-pounds of torque. I have a tendency to do 30, 35 to 40. With most barrel nut configurations, once you start getting it tight, you know, if you set it for 30 and you hit 30, the barrel nut indexes may not match up with your gas tube, so you may need to put a little bit more torque on it. That's why there's a torque range. I can't imagine 70 to 80 foot-pounds of torque. It's just an awful lot. 30 to 40 is pretty much all you really need on something like this. So I shoot for 30, 35, and if my index doesn't line up, I'll do a little bit more until it lines up, and then I stop. Now in this situation, this particular barrel nut uses a castle nut type of tool. Now this is the USGI castle nut tool I'm going to use. This one has 2 prongs on it versus the Magpul, which has 3. I'm not exactly sure which one will be the best to use on this. So let's just kind of take a look. And they both line up. Now, one thing I should mention though, in this particular situation, my torque wrench would be attached right here. So we have this extra length that's added onto the torque wrench. So you have to take that into consideration when you set your torque settings. In this particular situation, the torque wrench goes right here, so there's not much of an added length. You can pick up torque wrenches for relatively cheap. This is a $40, $50 one, and they are fairly accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a shot. I've got this torque wrench set for 30 foot-pounds. We're going to try the USGI tool, and I'm going to put my fingers right up here to hold this tool in these notches so it doesn't pop out. And that's basically all we need to do is And just tighten it down until it pops. I'm just going to double check it. Well, okay, off camera here, I was doing a little bit of experimentation, trying to learn the nuances of this proprietary barrel nut assembly. What I found was that after you get, 30, 35 foot-pounds of torque on this with this rod through here, it's difficult to pull this rod out because it basically creates too tight of a fit. And what I ended up doing was putting the castle nut wrench on here and just backing the nut off just ever so slightly, because once you tighten this down you can't pull this out. So I backed it off just a small bit, just enough so this will pull out. So that's going to be the trick when torquing down this barrel nut here. Okay, off camera I was doing a little bit of experimentation with this. What you need to do, you have this guide rod piece keeping this aligned, or if you don't have that, you can use something like this. This is specifically for keeping gas tubes aligned, or in a pinch you might be able to find a pretty big hex key and maybe put a hex key in there so you can get something to do this with. Hex key is obviously not ideal. This is ideal because this will slide all the way in like so, or maybe even a punch. I torque this down to between 30 and 35 foot-pounds of torque. And when you get done doing that, your guide rod is going to be very tight in this shaft right here. So what you're going to need to do is put your wrench back on here and just back the barrel nut off just a little bit so this moves freely. Not a lot, just a little bit. So that's what we're looking for. Once we have that done, you can go ahead and test fit your gas block and your gas tube, which definitely shouldn't be an issue at this point. And then we're ready to put this all back together. So that's going to be the trick there, is you need the alignment, you need a tool for alignment, and you need to remember that after you torque this down, you may not be able to pull this back out. Back it off just a little bit so this moves freely and you can remove it. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the gas block back on, and we'll be back to do the handguard next. Okay, as a good rule of thumb, what I do when I'm doing low profile gas blocks and gas tubes is I will get the gas tube and the gas block aligned so they are perfectly straight down the barrel. I take this entire, and then I'll tighten these bolts down, not super tight, but tight enough so this doesn't move. And I'll take the whole assembly out and I'll inspect it by looking down from this end of the receiver to make sure that this is absolutely straight. And then I'll install the charging handle and the bolt carrier group. You want to make sure that the charging handle and the bolt carrier group both slide over the end of the gas tube, that it's not binding, it's not hard to push in or anything. You want a perfect alignment. Now, there's other ways to do this as well. In this situation, the gas tube was already, the roll pin's already punched on the gas block. If you were just aligning a gas block, in some situations without this gas tube here, you can shine a light down in there and you can see through the hole in the gas block into the hole of the barrel. Or if you shine a light down here through this end, you can see it shining up, and then you can make your alignments to get the openings perfectly centered. That's another way. There's also some little plastic flexible things that you can stick in there through this end, and it goes down into the barrel, and that also kind of keeps the holes aligned. So this part of the installation, or reinstallation in this case, you want to be very meticulous about it. You want to take it off, double check it, check the functionality of your bolt carrier and your charging handle, eyeball this, and make sure, double triple check it, because your gas system is very important. If you do not do this correctly, you're going to have serious malfunctions with your rifle. So now that I've got this put back on, we're ready to deal with the handguard. So let me prep all those parts and we'll get to installing the handguard. All right, we're on to doing the handguard. The handguard is just going to slide down. Of course, you want to make sure that you've got it right side up, and you can tell by the logos. If the logos are upside down, I guess you could still rock the handguard with the logos upside down. So this is basically where we're at. I've got the holes lined up by eye. There's actually 6 holes on each side. The handguard comes with the Allen key and 6 flush mount bolts, and the bolts already have a little bit of Loctite on them. And we're going to hand tighten these. And I'm going to get one of them on this side, and then I'll do this one down here. Just to make sure that we're getting everything fully aligned. And with the Loctite on these, you don't need to put a lot of torque on these. So snug them up good so they're flush, but don't go crazy. You don't want to snap one of these bolts off. It would take a good amount of torque to snap one of these, but I've seen it happen, and they're very difficult to get out, and you don't want to strip them either. So hand tighten and till they're snug is the best course of action. Okay, and there's our handguard. So now at this point, you may be done if you don't have any rail accessories, except for the muzzle device, of course. In this situation, I'm going to put this full-length rail on the top here. And what I'm going to do with this, now, like I mentioned in my review of this, I'm not 100% happy with these bolts. They're awful big. And in this situation, we're going to be putting a Troy front sight right there. And to do that, I can't use a bolt right there. The bolt heads are just too big. So I'm going to leave that hole blank and put my first bolt back here. And these bolts also have a bit of Loctite on them, and don't over tighten those. And because of the design and where the barrel nut is situated, this very last hole on this full length rail right here, there's no hole right there. So the next hole we could put a bolt is right there. And I'm going to test fit the sight. because that's exactly where I want it, and of course that's going to work fine. This handguard is probably going to ship with the 4.5 inch and either 1 or 2.2 inch rails. It won't ship with this long one. This will be an optional item, and it should ship with enough. It will ship with enough bolts to cover all of the holes in the particular rail, whether it's a 6 inch rail, a 4 inch, or a 2 inch. The 2 inch sections have 2 holes in them. And I don't know how necessary it is to put a bolt in every one of these holes. Probably not very necessary, but it does ship with them, so I'm going to put them in here just for appearance sakes. And we'll get a couple more of these to go. Okay, nice and solid. That's not going anywhere. The Troy front sight. I'm going to put right at the very end. Right there. Now let's get that tightened down. Okay, Troy sight is good. Now, on this particular setup, I'm going to go ahead and put a 2-inch rail. Not sure exactly where I really want this, but for purposes of this installation video, I'm going to stick it right on this side. This would be ideally for a flashlight. Like so. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to, but that gives you an idea of what that would look like with pretty much a full-length top rail and 1 2-inch rail installed. Like I mentioned in my previous product review, the largest top rail is 14.5 inches. It is about a 1/2 inch between your upper receiver and the end of this rail section right here. These are prefabricated rails. Unfortunately, my particular handguard is a unique length due to the hexagonal cutouts, so there's a gap right there. I'm not real happy with the fact that there's a gap right there, but maybe somewhere down the line I can come up with a workaround for that. But for now, that's as good as that's going to get. Muzzle device. Go ahead and put the muzzle device back on. This particular rifle is just running a standard A2. And there's some oil on this, but there is no grease. I'm gonna go ahead and put some grease on this and put it back on, and we'll be back in just a second. Okay, got the A2 flash hider put back on there. A2 flash hiders, like a lot of muzzle devices that need to be timed correctly, come with a crush washer. Really, when you replace something like this, you should probably use a new crush washer. I'm using the existing crush washer on this. and this is torqued down to 40 foot-pounds of torque. And basically, since there's no cutouts on the bottom of an A2 flash hider, you're basically going to want to align these bottom two cuts here on both sides so they're even, and there's not much to it. So let's move on. Let me put this back together, and we'll take a look at the completed rifle with this new handguard. All right, here's the completely assembled rifle, so you can get an idea of what the 15.3-inch handguard looks like. And I should mention this right away because I know someone's going to call me on it. The previous section of the video, when I was installing the front sight, I grabbed the rear sight off my table and installed it on the front because I didn't have a front sight with me. I thought I did, but I didn't, so I grabbed the rear one. So I do definitely know the difference between a front and rear backup sight. The proper front sight is on the rifle. Now, this will save me from having to annotate a correction to that and answering 20 comments about it. So, installation, not too difficult. The steel barrel nut assembly is a little tricky using a castle nut wrench to install. And then there's the issue of getting the gas tube timed with the aluminum outer shroud of the barrel nut. So a little bit of a learning curve right there, but not a big issue. It wasn't a frustrating issue or anything like that. It's just an issue of learning a new method for a new item that I haven't worked with before. Other than that, the installation of everything else was fine. The handguard goes on real easy once you get the barrel nut on. And of course, the Picatinny rail sections bolt on just fine as well. And you've got a variety of different locations you can put your Picatinny rails. So even though these are bolt-on Picatinny rails, they are not the type that require a backing plate, as you saw in the previous portion of the video. So I know some people have asked, well, wouldn't key mod or an M-lock be better? And yeah, maybe so, but my main frustration with installing rails on a handguard is when you have to install a backing plate. And a backing plate on something way down here is very difficult to do. Way up on the front, might be not so bad if you have some hemostats or some needle nose pliers and you can hold it, but there is still a level of frustration. A Picatinny rail like this that just has the bolts on the outside and threads into the handguard, much easier. So if you decide you want to move your 4.5-inch rail back a couple of inches for your grip, it's pretty simple to do. You just take out a couple of the bolts and move it down. So you don't have to fuss around with the back plate. So anyway, that's going to wrap up this installation video of the 2phast Tactical Handguard. If you have any questions about the handguard or installation, definitely feel free to leave a comment here. I will update my YouTube channel when these handguards are actually available for purchase. They are not yet because I'm still evaluating this prototype.